Hello and welcome to Nothing But the Truth. Was the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly justified in passing a resolution calling upon the central government to resume talks with Pakistan, or did it exceed its authority and in doing so trespass on that of the central government? And second, how does India's only Muslim chief minister view the BJP claim that Muslims are indulging in love jihad? Those are the two key issues I shall discuss today with Jammu and Kashmir Chief Minister Omar Abdullah. Chief Minister, let me start with the resolution passed by your Legislative Council on Thursday, calling upon the central government to resume dialogue with Pakistan. Given that foreign policy is the prerogative of the central government, what was the need for this resolution?
Well, that you'll have to ask the Council. I'm not a member of the Legislative Council. I'm not the leader of the House. This was a resolution that was brought by the chairman of the Legislative Council. It was debated, discussed and passed. So this is really a question for the Legislative Council, not for the state government.
But it sounds to me as if you're distancing yourself from that resolution when you give me that answer. Are you now saying that in fact you question the need?
Absolutely not. I'm not questioning anything. I'm just saying that if you want a justification for this, if you want to ask them why they've done it, if you want to ask them whether they've exceeded their authority, that's a question for them. That's not a question for me.
What's your opinion? Do you believe they've exceeded their authority?
I mean, they have a right to an opinion. This is a democratic setup. Why should they be forbidden from expressing their opinion?
Let me put it like this. Many people believe that this resolution challenges the authority of the central government. Some people actually say it's a defiance of the central government.
This resolution expresses the sentiments of the people of Jammu and Kashmir who have suffered on account of poor relations between India and Pakistan, who have seen that every time dialogue has broken down, it is the people of Jammu and Kashmir who have borne the brunt of it, who have seen in recent years that every time the dialogue process was suspended for some reason or another, it resumed without the stated objectives having been realized, and therefore are worried that this will be a repeat of exactly the same sort of situation.
Let me quote to you what Venkaiah Naidu has said about this resolution. He says that resolution is totally uncalled for. Whom to talk to, when to talk, that has to be decided by the country. It's not a local issue or a state issue. And then he adds, the Jammu and Kashmir Council, have set a wrong precedent.
Look, we can't force the government to talk. Obviously, the decision to talk or not to talk, who to talk to, when to talk, that's a decision of the government of India. But how can you tell us that we can't express an opinion?
Except that you're expressing an opinion not just which is different to that of the central government, but it sounds as if it's in opposition to the central government. And given that this is a matter that is the prerogative of the central government, not a state council or a state assembly, people ask, is it fitting for you to express an opinion by way of a resolution so publicly? Because now the world thinks that there is a split in the Indian federal system.
Look, as I said, Karan, the legality of this decision, the constitutionality of it, that's a question for the Legislative Council, that's a question for the chairman of the Legislative Council. I'm just telling you that I can understand the sentiment behind the resolution. And I believe that any body that represents people has a right to express an opinion. It's for the government of India as to what they do with that opinion.
You know, your critics turn around and say that in fact this resolution is nothing but posturing by your party, the National Conference, because elections are some 3 months away. They say you're deliberately beating the Kashmiri drum in the hope that this will bring you votes.
How are we beating the Kashmiri drum when the resolution is brought by the chairman who belongs to the Congress party and is from Jammu?
You mean to say that therefore there is no question over here of trying to take a populist line? Because
no, I'm saying that please justify the allegation with facts.
But don't you think the fact is obvious? That this is a situation where in fact you are appealing to popular opinion.
that the resolution is brought by the chairman of the Legislative Council, who is a senior member of the Congress party, who belongs to Jammu region. It is supported by the entire Legislative Council. How is this the National Conference's or Umar Abdullah's politics?
All right, so you do not believe that there is any way in which your own politics or your party's political interests, particularly given the fact that you've got elections coming up in 3 months, is reflected behind this resolution? You're denying that allegation to me.
All that is reflected behind this resolution is our dissatisfaction with the way things are going, with our worry that Jammu and Kashmir has always borne the brunt of a breakdown in relations between India and Pakistan, that we see no alternative to dialogue. And we've expressed, the Legislative Council in this case has expressed that opinion.
Okay, let me take up your sense of dissatisfaction with the way things are going. Now, the Modi government called off talks with Pakistan because, despite being forewarned, the Pakistani High Commissioner insisted upon talking to Hurriyat. Not just many people, but perhaps most people in the country believe that was the right thing for the Indian government to do. Explain to the rest of the country why you differ and why you disagree.
Well, first and foremost, it's a cup of tea. It's a cup of tea that has been partaken in since the time of Narasimha Rao. This cup of tea is a reflection of Pakistan's stated position of their political and emotional support to Kashmir, etc., for whatever it's worth. Now, to suspend the dialogue over this cup of tea and then tell Pakistan that we won't talk to you until you stop giving these guys tea, in effect means that you're going to stop talking to Pakistan until their foreign policy changes.
Well,
now, I don't see how Pakistan, I'm sorry, let me finish. I don't see how Pakistan can stop interacting with the Hurriyat conference until the dialogue process actually produces some results. And that dialogue process is going nowhere. So you now have a chicken and egg story.
You know, you're
Does the dialogue process produce the results that need the tea to stop? Or does the tea stop and the dialogue process resume?
You're dismissing the meeting as simply as a cup of tea that would be had by the Pakistan High Commissioner and Hurriyat, but the truth is, the matter is much more serious than just that. After all, Pakistan has repeatedly said that, in fact, they believe Hurriyat is central to the entire process. They don't believe you're important. They don't believe Mehbooba Mufti is important. They'll talk to Hurriyat, but they won't talk to you. So isn't it strange that you're supporting the right of Pakistan to talk to Hurriyat, but not to you? And yet you represent the people of Kashmir, not Hurriyat. So there seems to be not a topsy-turviness. It seems to me that you're supporting the wrong side.
When this dialogue proceeds, as we hope it does, Pakistan will not be able to ignore the mainstream political parties. They can do so now, and they do it in fits and starts. I'm the same President of the National Conference who has had meetings with General Pervez Musharraf. Mehbooba Mufti has met Nawaz Sharif. She met Nawaz Sharif when he was an opposition leader. She met the former President Zardari. So it's not like Pakistan has not spoken to mainstream political leaders. They don't do it as regularly as they speak to Hurriyat leaders. But then we don't speak to the Hurriyat as regularly as we speak to our mainstream political leaders. The fact is that the government of India has spoken to these Hurriyat leaders. The NDA government has spoken to them. The UPA government has spoken to them. Mr. Chidambaram has had dialogues with them. The previous Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Advani, has had discussions with them. So, I mean, what's new in talking to them?
But what about the fact that Pakistan believes that Hurriyat represents Kashmir and you don't? That is the big rebuff that Pakistan hits out at you. They hit it out at Mehbooba Mufti. They do not recognize you as a representative. They don't believe you have a locus standi. And yet, you are the freely, popularly elected chief minister.
But, Karan, my locus standi doesn't come from Pakistan. Okay? I'm not insecure enough to require a certificate of authenticity from Pakistan. My certificate comes from the people of Jammu and Kashmir who participate in elections. The problem is that people like you want me to be recognized or certified from Pakistan. I don't need that certificate. I'm very comfortable with the certificate of authenticity that is stamped on me by the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, if the Hurriyat conference needs a stamp of authenticity from Pakistan, so be it. I would rather wish that they got their stamp from the people as well, but they don't have it. So that's fine if they can, if all they have is a stamp of authenticity from the Pakistanis. I think that's something they need to worry about more than me.
So what you're in effect doing is you're dismissing the point of view of the Modi government, who say that by talking to Hurriyat and ipso facto by refusing to talk to you, Pakistan is interfering in India's internal affairs. You dismiss that point of view, don't you?
Look, Pakistan has interfered in India's internal affairs for how long now? This is the point I make. By suspending the dialogue in the past, have you stopped Pakistan from interfering with India's internal affairs? Didn't you stop talking to Pakistan after the attack on Parliament? I was in the NDA government then when we prepared a list of 20 people that we said need to be handed over to India before we talk to Pakistan again. How many of those 20 came? We stopped talking to Pakistan after 9/11, after 26/11. We said that until those responsible for it are brought to justice, we will not talk to you. What happened? Other than hanging Ajmal Kasab, who else have we brought to justice? But the dialogue process resumed. Here now you're going to say, until you stop giving a cup of tea, we're not going to talk to you. You will go back to the dialogue table today or tomorrow. And all you will lose is time.
You know, it's more than just...
And please understand, it is, one moment, it is this Modi government that raised our expectations. You're the ones who were all buddy-buddy, sending each other shawls and saris and mangoes and all the rest of it. All the, as you put it in Punjabi, the japiyan papiyan. What happened to all that? You raised our expectations and hopes that this process was going to go forward. And now over a cup of tea, you dash them.
You know, the problem with talking to Pakistan goes simply beyond the fact that Pakistan is fixated with Hurriyat. There's also at the moment the fact that Pakistan itself is in political turmoil. The Prime Minister has been considerably weakened. He's lost out, in fact, substantially to his own army. So the second problem is, who does one talk to at this point of time? In fact, is there any purpose in talking?
Sorry, Karan, that's a completely different issue. Now, if you told me that you're not talking to Pakistan because you don't know who to talk to, I would understand. I would say, fine, we'll wait until we know who to talk to. If you said you were stopping the dialogue with Pakistan because of the violations of the ceasefire, I would understand that as well. Because I'd say, okay, fine, when the ceasefire resumes and it holds, the dialogue process will resume. But you've done neither. You have just said that because of a cup of tea, I'm going to stop talking. Now, I'm sorry, but my problem is I don't see this cup of tea ending. And then, because of that, I don't see the dialogue process resuming. And that's what worries me. So by all means, if you think that there's nobody in Pakistan you want to talk to, that's another justification. And if you want to share that with us, please do. If it's the violation of the ceasefire that worries you, that worries me as well. But a cup of tea that's carried on for 20 years, that's something that I find difficult to swallow.
You've raised two very important issues there, and I want to put both of them to you very briefly. First of all, you're saying it's conceivable. It's conceivable that there could be good reasons for not talking to Pakistan. They could do with the ceasefire violations. They could do with the fact that there is no central authority any longer. Nawaz Sharif is weakened. But the government hasn't given good reasons. What the government has cited is a very bad reason, a cup of tea with Hurriyat. That, in a sense, is the first point you're making.
I'm saying that it is possible for me to envisage a stronger government in Pakistan. It is also possible for me to envisage an end to the ceasefire violations much before I envisage an end to the cup of tea that the Hurriyat conference is given. And that's the part that worries me.
And the second,
you've set the benchmark, or you've set a sort of a yardstick that I believe is difficult to achieve.
Absolutely, that's the second point you're making, that by refusing to talk until Pakistan agrees not to talk to Hurriyat as a precondition, the government, in your belief, has set the bar so high that it will be very difficult to hold talks hereafter. In other words, what you're saying is that talks may well have been postponed for the foreseeable future and for a long time to come as well.
At this point in time, I don't see a resumption, because you are in effect asking for Pakistan to surrender its entire foreign policy on Kashmir before the dialogue has produced anything. This suspension of support to the Hurriyat would be perhaps one of the achievements of the dialogue process, not a precondition to the dialogue process, and that's the worrying part.
And you're also therefore concluding that the Modi government, by taking this posture, has done a disservice to India, and more particularly to the people of Kashmir, who want talks and want a solution to that problem.
I can't speak for the rest of India. I'm the Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir. I'm not the Prime Minister of India. I don't have a mandate to speak for the people of India. I'm the Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir. My views are limited to the sentiment of the majority of people here.
But you're saying that in fact, as far as the people...
I can't even claim to speak for 100% of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Only a majority.
But of those people that you can speak for from Jammu and Kashmir, are you saying the Modi government has done them a disservice by postponing and calling off talks on these grounds?
It basically just demoralizes people, because at the end of the day, we only see a solution emerging out of dialogue. We've had 25 years of violence, we've had wars, we've had skirmishes, but we haven't seen a solution. The closest we've come to a solution is through the dialogue process. First with Prime Minister Vajpayee and Musharraf, then with Dr. Manmohan Singh and Musharraf, and now with Nawaz Sharif and Dr. Manmohan Singh. So we were hoping that that process would actually carry on.
Okay, and your hopes have therefore been dashed. We're going to take a break at that point, Chief Minister. When I come back, I want to ask you questions as India's only Muslim Chief Minister and ask you, how do you respond to the claim being made widely by the BJP that Muslims are carrying out a love jihad? That's in a moment's time. See you after the commercial break. Welcome back to Nothing But the Truth and an exclusive interview with the Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, Omar Abdullah. Chief Minister, in this part I want to ask you questions as the only Muslim Chief Minister in India. Last week, Lakshmikant Vajpayee, the BJP UP President, said, clearly alluding to Muslims, have they got the certificate to rape girls because they belong to a particular religion? He says 99.99% of those accused of rape are Muslims. Even though he's talking about UP and not Kashmir, can you, as a Muslim, accept that?
Obviously not. There is no basis for this. I mean, this is just an indication of the BJP's own politics and their very communal politics. It's their attempt to keep the nation polarized because they've seen the advantages of it. I think the recent by-election results have caused great concern. There are state elections that are coming up in states that are crucial to the BJP, and they believe that clearly they can't fight this election on the slogan of Achhe Din Aane Wale Hain, because the Achhe Din aren't anywhere to be seen as of now, and therefore they'll continue to play the usual communal politics, and if it means fabricating statistics or distorting the truth, then they will have no hesitation in doing that.
In fact, Lakshmikant Vajpayee went one step further. He's claimed that Muslims in UP are carrying out what he calls a love jihad, that their intention is to lure innocent Hindu girls, marry them and then convert them to Islam. Do you believe that Muslims in UP are carrying out a love jihad?
I mean, I'm sorry, but that sort of terminology or phraseology, I mean, he obviously has a role better suited in Bollywood as a scriptwriter, because these are the sort of names one would expect on a B-class or a C-class Bollywood movie, not from the state leader of the largest party in the country today.
Okay.
I mean, you don't get to decide who you fall in love with, and it certainly can't be attributed to some sort of design on the part of a wider community to fall in love. And then, I mean, it takes two people to fall in love. You can't do it alone. So, I mean, if the Muslim boy is falling in love with the Hindu girl, it's both together. It's not one on their own. And to attribute political motive to this is honestly, it's pretty reprehensible. But it's not surprising.
You know, Yogi Adityanath, who's now been appointed the campaign head of the BJP for the forthcoming by-elections in UP, was recently quoted to say that for every single Hindu girl that's converted to Islam, he will personally convert 100 Muslim girls to Hinduism. How does that sort of rhetoric go down in Jammu and Kashmir?
Well, such sort of rhetoric is taken for what it is, rhetoric, but it does cause some level of concern, because this party is not just a political party now. They're ruling the government in the center, and they're ruling the government in the center with a majority all of their own. And therefore, unless the government of India distances itself from views like this, this is going to cause concern amongst all right-thinking people. I don't think it's just the Muslims that would be worried by this. I'd like to believe that people cutting across religious lines, but of the more sensible variety, would be concerned by talk like this.
You know, you're talking of the government of India distancing itself from people like Yogi Adityanath and Lakshmikant Bajpai, but the truth is, just yesterday, Kalraj Mishra, a senior member of Mr. Modi's cabinet, has gone on record to say that Hindutva is India's identity. How do you respond to that?
I think India's identity is far more than just that. India's identity is its secular framework. India's identity is the fact that a country as diverse as India, I mean, if you look at us north, south, east, west, the diversity in languages, religion, culture, food habits, everything, and yet we've stood together as one country. Nobody expected this country to survive in 1947. Everybody expected it to break apart and balkanize, so to speak. But we've stood the test of time, and that is India's identity, nothing else.
You know, you're rebutting Kalraj Mishra's position, but Kalraj Mishra's position, in fact, follows from the position taken by the Sansak Chalak of the RSS, Mohan Bhagwat, who in a sense is the patron father figure for everyone in the BJP. He says all Indians are Hindu. Would you call yourself a Hindu?
Certainly not. Why should I? I mean, as I said, I mean, India is more than just one religion, one community, one ideology, one thought process. This is what our founding fathers fought against. They fought against the two-nation theory. This is a country that has been founded on the basis of tolerance and equality for all religions.
You know, many people today are distressed by the rhetoric that is emerging from the BJP, particularly on Hindu-Muslim issues from states like UP. They're distressed by the comments made by Kalraj Mishra, Lakshmikant Bajpai, Yogi Adityanath. But they're perplexed that the Prime Minister is completely silent. Rather than admonish his party men, he's not saying anything at all. What do you make of that situation?
Why are you surprised? This is a party that went to town criticizing the previous Prime Minister for being quiet. But this Prime Minister is even more quiet than the other one. Sure, you get the set-piece speeches at political events and government functions, but nothing beyond that.
I'll tell you why
at least Dr. Manmohan Singh, one minute, at least Dr. Manmohan Singh had to his credit the fact that he would interact with journalists on flights back from overseas visits. Unfortunately, our current Prime Minister doesn't even do that. I mean, he doesn't even take journalists with him, let alone interact with them. He was very vocal in opposition, but clearly he's chosen not to be in government. And again, I think it's also, rather than being worried by it, I think we should take some satisfaction from it, because the more the BJP is going to tom-tom this communal agenda, the more they are basically acknowledging that their governance agenda is failing.
You know, I'll tell you why.
They had fought an election on a campaign of governance.
I'll tell you why people are surprised. It's because the Prime Minister made such an eloquent speech from the ramparts of the Red Fort on Independence Day, and he spoke at great length about the need for communal harmony, brotherliness and togetherness. And the rhetoric that's coming from his partymen in UP seems to contradict that fairly comprehensively, and so people are surprised that the Prime Minister is tolerating it, not admonishing his partymen, but in fact keeping silent. What do you make of the Prime Minister's silence? Do you think it suggests a certain hypocrisy on the Prime Minister's part? Or do you think this is doubly intended, as double speak? The PM says one thing, his partymen say another, and that's the way they want it to be. Which do you think it is?
Well, I think it's a bit of good cop, bad cop. You make the nice tolerant remarks even though you don't follow them through. You let the others make the more worrisome statements. You don't admonish them. And you basically divert attention away from what are clearly failures of governance and administration. As I said earlier, these sort of statements would be unnecessary and perhaps absent if they had other things to talk about that would be of more interest to people.
My last issue with you before we end this interview, elections in your state are just about 3 months away. The BJP has already launched what it calls Mission 44. They believe it could carry them to power. Do you think they could succeed?
Do I think they'll succeed in Mission 44? No. It's another one of those nice Bollywood sort of glib slogans like that, Love Jihad or whatever they called it, Mission 44. That's not happening. But what the BJP is trying to do is to basically cozy up to the separatists so that they can take advantage of the boycott call in some seats and basically wrest those seats away into their kitty. But the 44 number, that's a pipe dream. That's not happening.
Suppose the BJP were to end up sweeping Jammu and ended up as the single largest party after the elections in your state. What impact would that have on your state's politics?
I have no idea. It depends on what allies they find.
But the prospect of the BJP becoming the single largest because it sweeps Jammu, does it worry you?
Well, I think it should worry those people who are instrumental behind the boycott and the division of the vote in Kashmir. The National Conference has always stood for all three parts of the state.
Okay.
We have a representative character in Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh, and therefore Jammu's voice being heard is not something that worries us. But the division of votes in other parts of the state and artificially orchestrated, that's something that does worry us.
All right, Chief Minister, let's leave it there. We don't know what the outcome will be, but you've certainly indicated your concern. My thanks to you for agreeing to speak to nothing but the truth. Goodbye.